Well, daily greetings, everybody. Welcome to Draft Professor. Joined this morning by Jack Brentnall and Clint Goss. Clint, it's good to see you. This is a little bit earlier than you and I usually podcast. So, good morning. How are things out in Georgia?
Yeah, it's going all right. I'm admittedly a little bouncing back off a night with the young children, it being cold this morning, but things are going well.
Yep. And I thought in Ohio we were done with snow until November, and I was proven wrong this morning. So, Jack, I hope the weather out in the UK is a little bit warmer than it is in the eastern part of the United States today.
It's finally. I mean, if I open this blind, I'll get blinded. It is gloriously sunny. About like 12 degrees, which I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it's warm enough. I don't need like layers, so I'm very happy because it's been raining. I think someone said it's rained every day in the UK this year, which even for us that's a lot. So I'm happy we finally got a dry day.
So, and I don't think people tune into a draft podcast to hear the weather reports at three random locations across the world, but it's good to see everybody on this great Sunday. The scouting combine is starting this week, and we're going to be diving into some defensive line and offensive line prospects. But just to kind of outline for everybody, Jack, where is your board right now? And then how does the combine overall affect your board?
Yeah, so I'm getting to a point where it's fairly fixed. I'm still kind of working through players. I think I'm up to probably somewhere between I've not counted, somewhere between 150 and 200 guys now with full reports written. For me, the combine is, so I have a part of my grading scale, which is basically their athletic ability I'll grade on tape, and then there is a portion of that that is then I use relative athletic score, obviously, which then comes from the combine, and then I'll kind of weigh that in as well. So if a guy tests substantially differently to how I grade them on tape, there will be a bump. But then, to be honest, a lot of the time, if there is a big discrepancy between those two, the combine is often a good excuse to go back and watch the film and work out, okay, like, is this guy just a good tester, or did I miss anything? Or is he a bad tester, or did I overestimate his athleticism? So it's a useful kind of checkpoint, because some of these guys, depending on the level of competition, it can be tricky sometimes to fully get a handle on where their athleticism's at.
And Clint, how about you? So where is your board, and how is the combine going to help you or affect your board?
Echoing a couple of the things Jack just said, as far as where my board is, I'm a little deeper into it. I'm about done. I'm in the 300s at this point, which is pretty standard for me at this point, year over year. The combine for me is really just tiebreaker. It's like if I'm in between two guards and one of them blatantly tests better than the other one, that probably makes a decision for me as far as betting on trades, particularly in day three players. And kind of like Jack mentioned about the going back to the tape, it's kind of a good checkpoint for me to look at the guys that I'm like, man, I didn't see that, or man, I really did see that, kind of grade myself there. And I think too, I'd add, the combine can be a good kind of checkpoint for the concept of like, yeah, a guy, looks like Tarzan and plays like Jane kind of thing. It's like, who are some of the guys that are going to go test like freaks? But I'm like, man, I thought he just looked really mid on tape. Or flip it the other way, where we're sitting here like, mentioned relative athletic score. I'm big on RAS personally. Really like all the work they do there. It's like, or look at somebody that it's like, man, this guy's really not that athletic, but he's just a football player. The old classic Dr. Z quote from the early Mel Kiper days about, you want a guy that looks good in the shorts, or you want a football player. There's both sides of that with this. And it's just a good checkpoint for this week. And then lastly, I mean, this kind of sounds like kind of lame, but it's like, hell, just enjoy it. The combine's such a great kind of break for us as far as it's like we have like Senior Bowl and Shrine Bowl, then we have Super Bowl, then it's just flat. Yeah, this is kind of like the way that the NFL is giving it. At least it's like it's a little bit of a taste. I'm getting excited about it this week. So that's a pretty loaded answer, but yeah.
Okay, well, and I guess one of my favorite combine stories was last year with Marcus Siegel. So he is, I believe, a starting safety right now for the 49ers. But like EJ had a low / undraftable grade on Siegel. And to Jack's point, like athleticism was part of EJ's grading scale, and Siegel tested really well at the combine, like higher than expected. And to Jack's point, the testing made EJ go back and watch the tape again, and some scores got bumped up. So the combine may or may not bump a player up. Like Jack, you said RAS is part of your grading scale. That's not true for everyone. When somebody hears a player is moved up because of the combine, a lot of times it's the athletic testing didn't match the grading. Go back and watch the tape, and then we'll come back and talk about, combine risers, and maybe that's because we had to reevaluate the player. But when it comes to offensive linemen, Clint, any offensive lineman where you've got them grouped together and the combine's going to separate them, or a player has something to prove at the combine for you?
I think I'd kind of first say that by like, for example, you said the guy that the testing makes people go back to the tape. Like, I think Jalen Farmer, guard out of Kentucky, is going to be somebody that's going to go test a lot better than people realize, and it's going to make a lot of people go back and watch, like he did for me after the Senior Bowl when I looked up and the guy was running like 17, 18 miles an hour at 300 plus pounds. And I understand people aren't going to be quite as concerned about 40 yards downfield with an offensive lineman. But the fact the guy was that big a freak, that's an example of like a tie break that made me go back and look at it. If I looked at like a tier of some guys that I'm excited to see who can maybe separate themselves, I'd probably look at that center group. I want to see who, as far as some 10-yard split and just overall lateral ability, because I've really had a lot of fun recently. I've recently gotten really into Matt Golban out of Michigan State. I came out of the Senior Bowl real high on Sam Heck out of Kansas State. And then there's guys that I've already known will come in here and test really well. Like Logan Jones out of Iowa is going to go blow it up in Indianapolis. He'll be somebody that'll probably run what I would imagine would be the fastest 40 of the group. And again, you're going to be more interested in like a 10-yard split versus 40 yards downfield for a center. But some other guys that I feel like I don't want to say we're forgetting, but a position such as, say, center, where it's like you kind of get some of these names that are more 4th, 5th, 6th round guys that can get a little forgotten here and can get brought back to life. I'd really like to see some strong performance out of some guys like Pat Coogan out of Indiana. Parker Brailsford out of Alabama, somebody that could go light it up. I mean, it's more of a sub 300 wide zone center who can move, big time move. I mean, as far as getting to the second level is the fastest center in this class. He's somebody that could go blow up drills in a good way. Particularly for teams and fans and media of teams that run that wide zone scheme that he could fit. I could see him being somebody that gets it excited. James Brockmeyer's a snub. I was going to say his name in there too, but you get the point. Some of those centers that are beyond the top one or two, I think there's a lot of potential there for some of them to start getting some more noise.
Well, Clint, out of all the times I've heard you talk about Logan Jones, that was the shortest. Jack, how about you for offensive line? Like anybody that for you they're in a spot on your board and you really are looking forward to what their testing metrics will be?
This is kind of weirdly, similar. So I posted last night about Jalen Farmer because I only got to his tape yesterday, and he ended up grading really high for me. I do think he's got a bit of stiffness to him, but I think he's explosive. I think he will turn some heads with, assuming he does them. I think his 40 would be pretty good for his size anyway. And I think his vert and broad jump will be good. So in terms of those centers, so appreciate Connolly won't test. I have within 0.09 on my grading scale, I have Logan Jones, Connolly, and Sam Hecht. Not in that order, but they are all kind of tightly packed in that similar range, which is probably kind of the early day 3 probably range, late day 2 maybe. So again, I think, like I say, the testing will form a part of my grade. Exactly how much it will jump them, but I can see those guys moving around a little bit based on how things go. So those are the ones that I think I'm looking at. I suppose offensive tackle wise, I think we could get some impressive testing numbers there. I think Monroe Freeling, I think from Georgia, I think will test really well. I don't know if he's necessarily, so he's my tackle 5 at the moment. I don't think he's necessarily going to be able to jump up above that in terms of where I've got him on the board, but I think he'll test well. I'm really interested to see what Caden Proctor tests like and what he weighs in at. One of the big things with him has been the weight fluctuation while he's been at Alabama, keeping that under control. I'm sure I read something recently that said at one point, I don't know if it was this year, but earlier in his career, he'd been playing at like 400 pounds. So seeing how he is, I remember, was it a couple of years ago, the whole Tavondre Sweat thing, in terms of, his ability to manage his weight. He's obviously worked out well as a player, but interested to see how Proctor weighs and then how he tests. I think he could really be one of those stories of like Jordan Davis was a few years ago, where it's like big man runs fast. I think it could be a bit like that. I mean, that's always amazing to watch. I love watching the corners and the wide receivers run the 40, but there is something like quite enjoyable about watching a man who's like 3 times my size running twice as fast as I could run it.
And one of the things we were talking about,
I don't think that Jordan Davis one will ever be topped in terms of just like people's jaws hitting the floor. And I'm a Georgia fan, so I as much as anybody knew going into that he was about to go drop a number. But even then, that's some GOAT kind of stuff going into Combine Week.
Yeah, he's one of those guys, when they show the simulcam and the guys are running, he's always going to be one of the ones that's on there just because of how fast he ran at the side.
They're going to use him to troll quarterbacks that run like a 5 flat or something. Yeah. They're like, this guy's so slow that Jordan Davis at 70 pounds heavier would absolutely gas his ass.
Yeah. And so imagine like putting Tom Brady next to Jordan Davis and watching those two run, right? Because again, to your point also, I think both of you mentioned the 10-yard split for the linemen. Mm-hmm. So Jack, could you dive into a little bit about, okay, for a lineman, we're not looking at the 40-yard dash is cool, but the 10-yard split is more important. Can you dive into that a little bit deeper?
Yeah, I can't remember who I heard say it, but I remember once hearing somebody say something like, if your offensive lineman's running 40 yards, something's gone horribly wrong anyway. So I don't need to worry about that too much. Like, whatever's happening that's forcing them to run 40 yards is probably not good. 10-yard, I think, is a good measure of their explosiveness, which is obviously much more important than long speed for an offensive lineman. I think for me, that's why those drills that test that in terms of whether it's 10-yard, vertical, or broad jump are much more important, especially I think for an offensive tackle. You need guys who can get good depth in their sets in pass protection. So that ability to move explosively. So like say Proctor, for example, he's not a good redirect guy, but he's explosive. I think that is something that teams do look at. I think the other drill, I think the most important drill for me with offensive linemen is the short shuttle. I feel like very few of them do it now. It's a lot of the way now. You'll get these guys running the 40 because I feel like the track at Indy is now quicker than it used to be, and guys run faster. And it's the headline thing, right? Everybody tunes in for the 40. Only the nerds care about shuttle times and 3 cones. But I think the short shuttle is really important, especially for interior guys, but also for tackles, because it is that redirect quickness, the lateral ability. That is where guys like Proctor, again, I don't think he won't do it, but that I think is what separates it, because people will see the explosiveness, but if you can't change direction quickly and play in space, then that I think is a limiter. I know that Josh Norris from Underdog did some work a while ago looking at shuttle times, and I think it was something like a 4.47 is if you run under a 4.47, an offensive lineman runs under a 4.47, the hit rate on those guys across the rounds in terms of their starts, I think, is pretty high. I think he looked at I can't remember what percentage it was, but it was like 30 out of 35 guys who run that have been drafted, and those who have started at least 80% of their games. You look at some of the names that did that, it's like Tanner Bortolini, Zach Tom, the guys who went later on but have ended up becoming starters. If there is a guy who's going to do that this year, I think Logan Jones. I did see a report that he ran it was something like a 4.1 in the shuttle or something, and he's apparently got a 1.5 in the 10-yard split, which I don't think is not true. He moves incredibly for his size. So I'll be really interested to see if these guys run shuttles, how some of them fare. I think especially for centers, and yeah, that's really important for me.
Clint, do you want to weigh in on which parts of the testing are going to be really important for you as far as offensive linemen go?
Yeah, Jack said a lot of great stuff there, and I'd piggyback some of it. For starters, I think the whole concept of looking at, say, the 20-yard shuttle or the 10-yard split versus the 40-yard dash, and the people who really geek out about it more so caring about those versus the 40, which is more of the sell. It's kind of the old golf saying of drive for show, putt for dough. Those pro scouts for teams are going to be looking more at those. I love the mention on Logan Jones there. You can bet your ass he's going to go out there and do those drills. As somebody, yeah, I mean, Jim's laughing, but it's the truth. I mean, if you were in his camp or his agent, et cetera, you'd be like, this is your moment. In this whole process, this is your moment right now. You want to go up there, and I liked earlier, Jack talked about that separation he kind of has of Connor Lew, Logan Jones, and then you said Sam Heck. I have those 3 in whatever order paired together as well. So that was a really good example of this is his moment to be like, oh, yeah, you need somebody ready day one and who's got the explosiveness in their legs ready to go versus, say, a Connor Lew coming off of an ACL injury. Boom, look at this that I just threw up there. Are you looking for somebody versus Hecht who's got this kind of speed, et cetera, and it's 300 plus? Bam, there you go. That's somebody that'll definitely be an example of it. That was a great one. Similarly for me, I mean, I really want to see 10-yard on those guys, their explosiveness. I want to see who will come out and do some of that 20-yard split to really see the change of direction and agility. And particularly for somebody that comes in, and not to keep using him as an example, but let's say Logan Jones comes out here and throws this crazy good number on the 40. Okay, well, that's great vertical speed. Let's see who can change direction. I'll be interested to see as far as the broad jump and the verts a little bit, just as an example of people being able to show crazy lower body strength. And then not that I'm looking at it as much for grading. It's this one I would add just for fun. It's fun to see who can go hang a number on the bench because of the entire combine. When we talk about the offensive line, the defensive line, that's going to be the guys that go and hang numbers. I can always remember being a young guy. This is a name you might not even remember. Jeff Owens out of Georgia. I had met him right before the combine, and he proceeded to go hang 46 reps of 225. I mean, yeah, just we talked about just that astronomical kind of shit. That one will be fun. But I mean, no, I'm really excited to see mostly these 10 yards on the guys. And then too, that was another thing. Jack was talking about Proctor as an example. Is it's like I want to see who's choosing to participate in what, who's pushing it off to a pro day, who's saying, I'm not doing it. Oh, I don't think so. Who's coming in at weigh-ins? Because I mean, he talked about more of the example of like somebody on the heavier side. You could flip it right over to the smaller side. It's like, what's somebody like a Parker Brailsford going to come in? Is he going to be above 290, 295? You could even flip it down to more day threes. Connor Tollison out of Missouri is a guy that I think is getting a lot of attention from teams coming out of the All-American Bowl settings. You know, he's somebody that I think could be teetering on 285, 290, et cetera. It's like he needs to go post a number. That's one of the most fun things to me about the depth of the offensive line class specifically in this year is it's like there's going to be buzz for day three guys and where their measurements are just as much, if not more, as the guys at the very tip top. There's going to be so much coverage. I mean, I'll say this. There's no doubt in my mind the best day of the combine is the big guys. I'm talking just purely from a consumer standpoint.
Well, so I mean, that's where teams get built, right? 9 of the 22 players on the field on a given play are linemen, right? I mean, that's a third of the players on the field are linemen. That's more than a third. Mm-hmm. So, Jack, when you look at the offensive tackle class, we talk about arm length every year. Are there any players, any offensive tackle prospects where the arm length is going to change your evaluation?
I think there's some guys where they're kind of on the cusp. Like, I think Spencer Fano, I think he's going to be right around that 33-inch mark, which is always that kind of, do you kick him inside, don't you kick him inside type thing. I think another one there's going to be conversation around is Francis Marinoa from Miami. Again, he'll probably be right around that mark. And I'm interested to see if he tests, and I'm interested to see if Fano tests as well, right? Because I think for someone like Fano, I think what Clint mentioned there, I think is a really good point. He feels like the kind of guy who could add weight for the combine and it be, that classic combine weight where he's, drunk 5 gallons of water beforehand. And then he doesn't test and then he tests at his pro day. Like, I could see that being a thing because he's one of those guys that is on that kind of weight cusp. But I think to me, arm length is probably one of those that I always want to try and consider in the context of kind of how you win and the rest of your game, but also wingspan. I think wingspan is also important. Obviously, a lot of focus last year on Will Campbell and his short arms, but if you listen to a lot of like the kind of O-line guys, they'll say wingspan is just as important as arm length because it's very rare that you are kind of at full extension necessarily with your blocker, but the wingspan is really important. So yeah, those are probably the ones that the big names that I think are going to lead to some conversations. I think they are both probably tackles, but could also play guard. I think it just depends on what kind of scheme you're running and on what you're asking them to do. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's conversations after the combine about is Fano a guard, is Marinero a guard. I mean, that's already a conversation. I think it might just be brought back up again. Also, there might even be a bit, and I don't know, of the Jalen Farmer, the guard from Kentucky. He has long arms. I think they've been, like 34 and a bit. If he tests well, obviously he got tackle reps at the Senior Bowl. I don't think he's a tackle. I would not be surprised if like a guy with great measurables, great strength, and who tests well, there will probably be some talk about can he play tackle? Not necessarily permanently, but is he a guy who you can have as like a guard who can kick out to tackle if you need him? So that'll be another interesting one.
Well, and there are games in the NFL where teams have to start 2 backup tackles.
Yeah.
Right. That may have even been the Bills-Atlanta game. It was right around the time that Buffalo played Atlanta that both of Buffalo's starting offensive tackles were out. It was either the Atlanta game or the week after. So if you have a guard that can kick out to tackle for 1 week, that can be significant.
Well, you just mentioned the Bills. I was going to immediately segue from Jack just mentioning Farmer there and say that was such a great starting point to say that. That's another thing about this is we got a lot of guys this year that we're talking about. Oh, well, he's a center, but yeah, he can give you starts at guard, he can give you starts at tackle, or vice versa, and all that. Like we've talked about a Brian Parker II out of Duke. I mean, has played left tackle there his whole career, but was a center recruit when they signed him. Went into Shrine Bowl, took reps at guard and center. Was quoted as saying that he's really leaning into showing teams he can play both. That he thinks that's one of his selling points as far as his value. I mean, look at a team that's got multiple issues. Like off the top of my head, let's say the Vegas Raiders, that's got spots all across an offensive line. How do you not look at a guy like him and be like, man, this is a security blanket big time as we start building this thing out with a young quarterback week to week. If we got to kick him to right guard 1 week because somebody's hurt, bam, we're going to let him start at center for 7 weeks, but then we're down a guard, bam, kick him over. I mean, that's a fascinating one to me. You said about Farmer, and it's just that much more opportunity for guys to boost some stock as we go into this. I mean, and not to be Clint railing off too many names here, but like I mentioned Matt Golban, center out of Michigan State earlier. He was a 2-3 year starter at guard before getting kicked inside this year. I mean, that's somebody that legitimately can play all the interior spots. I'm fascinated to see how he tests out.
Matt Golban needs more airtime.
Dude, I didn't get on to him until recently. Like, I think I had put out like an updated center ranking, and you were one of the people that was like, hey, I think you might have missed one in here. And I watched him, and hell, he ended up being a top 5 or 6 center on my board right now.
He's my top center. Right now.
No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that was one where I was like, "Damn, I had lost this guy in the shuffle because I didn't get to watching him until the last few weeks."
Well,
yeah.
But ultimately, right, with a player like Golban, he was playing on Michigan State, and as a couple of draft professors have put, like he was the only offensive lineman on Michigan State. Like, what were the other 4 guys doing? Type level, but I want to give Owen a lot of credit. So first of all, it's interesting, Jack, that he's center 1 for you because I'm beginning to see that you and Owen, how whatever your grading scales are, like because you guys match on Capehart and you match on Golban. Those are some interesting players to match up evals on day 3. But going back to Golban, I'm assuming Owen, when we did summer scouting, because we did a Michigan State show, so he probably had just Golban reasonable grades from summer. He did his checkup and he's like, how come nobody's talking about him? And right. And so now anybody I can share the propaganda, I'm sharing it.
And I think like part of it from my side is like, because that line was so bad, the rest of the line, when I'm watching defensive guys, I just never watch them play Michigan State because it's like every defensive guy, if you watch them play Michigan State, they have their best game. And then you watch them against others and it's like, oh, they're not as good. Like, it's one of those where I was like, the guys they're playing against, especially if you're looking at edge rushers, the guys they're going against, the Michigan State guys just weren't the kind of caliber of competition I want to watch them against. So I wasn't then really watching much defense versus Michigan State. But then, like, I saw people talking about it. I was like, right, I'll put this tape on. And I'd watched, that offense. Obviously, I know it didn't end up very well this year, but like it was a pro-style offense. Like, one of the things I liked about Aiden Charles, the quarterback, coming into this year was like they're running like NFL stuff. Like it's pro-style concepts. So you've got a guy in an offense playing center, running a pro-style offense with no real help around him. You can't say, like you sometimes do with interior line, especially centers, like, okay, right, well, they've got good talent around them, so they're being well supported. He's not in a position to succeed, and he still looks good. So it's like, okay, well, if he looks good as a center on a team with 4 other guys who just were not playing well and we're not talking about as NFL prospects, what does that mean then when you put him around good talent and the right infrastructure in his first season playing center? having played guard before. Like, I think that's really interesting.
Well, he'll take my Falcons, for example, in this conversation you just said about Golban. It's like we're coming off of 2 years ago. We had Drew Dahlman in there between Chris Lindstrom, one of the best guards in the league, and Matt Bergeron as a young guard who I think is a good, solid guard. I don't think he's anything, elite or anything. We let Dahlman walk. We come in with Ryan Newsel as this undrafted free agent out of Appalachian State who's kind of been around a few years. He struggled this past year. To more of the tone of like, if you can't fit in between these two and next to Chris Lindstrom, that's probably not great. Hell, if let's say we take Golban and throw him out there next to like a Chris Lindstrom when he's been coming from Michigan State, where it's more of like, hey, you're swimming while everyone else around you is drowning, begging for a life raft. He'd be like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life, man. I love that mention as far as you've seen somebody succeed with no help around him. And that's part of our projection point of it's like he's had no help. What? He's had no help, and we're all sitting here talking this fondly about him. I mean, listen to the three of us talking about, oh, man, he's my top center. Oh, he's a no doubt top 5 center. Oh, I overlooked him for a long few weeks. I'm so glad y'all mentioned it. I got him in there now. He's a slam dunk kind of player. It's like for somebody that's not getting as much pub, and like Jack said, and he's absolutely right about like, yeah, if I was going to watch an edge rusher, like for example, if I was going to watch Derek Moore out of Michigan, I'm not really going to go pull up that Michigan State tape, in a rivalry game as much as I normally would have. It's like, and we're still this buzzed about the guy. It's like, that's some of that dig deep kind of shit that makes this really fun. No, I'm really glad we've kind of mentioned him a little bit on this episode because he's somebody, as we talked about going into the combine this week that, yeah, a couple of us are talking about him. Oh, some of the people real deep into it. It's like, where do you start to see consensus just kind of jump up and be like, oh, wait, we're here? Because we've seen consensus has really caught up a little bit on like Sam Hecht out of Kansas State, Logan Jones out of Iowa. This could be the next guy.
Yep. And I do think this is a pretty good center class. We actually did a show on centers. I think it was Wednesday. And one of the things that was pointed out, I think the average number of centers drafted is like 6 or 7. Now, there's a gray area there. Is Graham Barton really a center? So it's difficult to measure how many centers get drafted, but there aren't many. But this year, if we see 8 centers get drafted, I mean, we've already talked, I think, on this show about 6 of them. Mm-hmm. Maybe even we've hit all 8. But Jack, what do you think of this question here from Randy?
Yeah, so I completely agree with that because I think, especially with the way the NFL is going in terms of how offenses are run, you are seeing teams move away from the old school kind of quarterback handles, all of the protection stuff. There are still some quarterbacks who do that the very best will do it. You're looking at a lot more teams that want to, especially with young quarterbacks, take the load off the quarterback, give him less pre-snap responsibility in terms of protections. So if the quarterback's not doing it, your center is the vast majority of the time the one who's going to be doing that. So having a smart center who can get the rest of the line set with the way, we look at the Seahawks, look at how Mike McDonald runs his defense, right? You've got the best teams in the NFL right now are not necessarily blitz happy, but they are running sim pressures. They're running creepers. They are breaking protections all the time in terms of offensive pass pro. You need a guy at center. If that's your guy dealing with your pass pro, you need a guy who is smart, who is able to make your offensive line right. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. I think traditionally people would say left tackle is the most valuable, then there's a gap, and then it's right tackle. I think there's maybe been a little bit more recognition now that tackle just in and of itself is valuable. Then guard, then center. I mean, for me, I don't really think there's that much of a distinction between guard and center. If anything, if you're in a team where your center is calling protections, then you could almost argue that a center is more valuable than a guard. Yes, they are in less one-on-one blocks. So from that perspective, like you're not really, unless you're playing against a team with just a true nose, you're not generally getting a center who is kind of one-on-one every time. But from a mental standpoint and getting the offense kind of running as it should be, they're underrated. They don't get the praise they deserve. You notice when there's a bad one, though. When you've got a good center who gets all those things done, a lot of the time you don't notice, especially if you're watching on broadcast, like you don't see it. When there's one that can't get people lined up and can't set the protections, then you know because the quarterback's on the deck 10 times again.
So one of my responses there, Randy, as far as the value of center, and I've said this before, is that there's one center on the field, right? So on a 53-man roster, there's one center on the field. There's only a couple of other positions where there's only going to be one of. There's one quarterback, there's one center, right? And those are the positions we see the fewest drafted. And that's because your backup center has to also play guard, right? Because teams don't carry 10 offensive linemen, right? They're usually carrying 8 or 9 on the 53. So the need, like, first of all, most teams aren't going to go into the draft needing a center. So I think we did a count, and I think Joe Marino from Lock On Scouting did a similar account on his podcast. I think there were 6 or 7 teams that need a center right now. Every single one of those teams is going to solve that need before the draft. So I think the position gets pushed down if they don't have position flexibility. Like, I think Brian Parker is going to be higher than a Parker Brailsford. It may not be because of ability. It's going to be because of position flexibility, right? You're going to be able to find a way to get Parker on the field the same way like JPJ was playing guard for the Raiders, even though he was like center 1 or center 2 the year he was drafted. Clint, what do you think as far as centers as a valued position?
Yeah, JPJ was a great mention. I'll tell you, if we look at, the Super Bowl we just came off of, and he did not have a great night because he should be at center. But, hell, who would have ever guessed that Jared Wilson was going to be playing guard in New England coming out of Georgia as a career center? But that just being a testament to it. I mean, I think we talked about RAS earlier. I think he might have been the 100th percentile center as far as testing. But, as far as this class, I believe the number, if you look at the last 3 drafts of drafted centers, is roughly about 8. And if you sat here and railed off names, and let's include Brian Parker in the center group here, because I do. So just for that, Brian Parker's getting drafted. Connor Lew's getting drafted. Logan Jones is getting drafted. Sam Heck's getting drafted. Matt Golbin's getting drafted. Jake Slaughter's getting drafted. I think Coogan's getting drafted. Then you got that names of like Jaeger Burton out of Kentucky, Parker Brailsford out of Bama, James Brockermeyer out of Miami, who's a sleeper. Do you consider Trey Zune in there? I wouldn't for this exercise. And then you got a couple names that are probably on that borderline of like a Bryce Foster out of Kansas, Connor Tolson out of Missouri, who I think is getting more NFL pub than he is media. And we could keep going. So all that to say, that 8 number is going to get hit in here. I really do think so. Even considering, like Jim said, there's going to be a lot of answers as far as, free agency. Like, take my Falcons, for example. I'm fascinated to see if they touch on that as a touch point in free agency before entering the draft, particularly with limited picks. But I'll tell you, man, I mean, you mentioned Brian Parker. I loved that parallel you had between him and Brailsford, because it's absolutely right. I mean, I think – and what did I say earlier about him at the Shrine Bowl saying, oh, yeah, I could, I've played tackle. I can give you center snaps. I can give you guard snaps. I'm going to show it this week, because he knows that's how he can go get himself pushed up boards and sell himself, versus, say, a Brailsford is the perfect example. You put Brailsford at guard, he's going to get his ass ran over. And the guy plays bigger than he is. But if you took 8th grade physics, you understand that a 290 well, it's just the truth. You know what I mean? It is. It's like, I don't care if he plays bigger in his weight. I don't care if he's got a big motor. There's only so much you can do with that much poundage coming down on your head,
Well, Clint, I'm impressed that you remember things from 8th grade physics.
Oh, what do you mean? You couldn't believe that I wasn't completely locked in on 8th grade physics? I was a star student.
Oh, Well, yeah, and before we go into a tangent on the U.S. educational system, we still have to talk about the defensive linemen. Um, Jack, what defensive linemen have the most to prove to you at the NFL scouting combine this week?
So I think I will be interested to see how Keldrick Falk from Auburn tests. If he does, a lot of the guys who are getting the first round buzz won't test. I think I don't see the high end athlete that some do on tape. I think he was a Freaks List member last summer. I don't think he's necessarily a bad athlete. I just don't think that's where he wins. So I'll be interested to see how he tests and whether that is one of those guys where I'm revisiting the tape or not. I think there's other guys like Denai Dennis Sutton from Penn State. I think he will be. I mean, Penn State always have these guys who will test well. I'm interested to see if he does the agility drills because I think he's really explosive for his size. I think he doesn't bend at all. I think he's really stiff. So if he does do the 3-cone, which I think for me is the one certainly with the edge rushers, is the 3-cone is the one I'm looking at because that's going to be the one that tests your ankle flexion and ability to bend and get low. In terms of other guys, I think I'm less high on him, but Grayson Holton, the defensive tackle from Oklahoma, I think he's going to test well. He's super explosive. Gabe Backus from Illinois, he cut some weight for the Senior Bowl, and he was already explosive for his size, but I thought he looked really good in terms of how he moved at the Senior Bowl. So interested to see if he kind of is at a similar weight for the combine, and then what that means for his testing numbers. And then a slightly random one. This is more for the measurables. So Malachi Lawrence, the edge from UCF, so the verified numbers I had on him over the summer, or at least I presume they were verified, because his weight and his height were 35-inch arms. But he measured in at the Senior Bowl with, I can't remember what it was, but it certainly wasn't 33, and it wasn't even particularly close to 33. I know last year we had the whole debate around, well, which one did the measurements right? Was it the Combine or was it the Senior Bowl? Because there was discrepancies between the two. I'm interested to see whether he measures in closer to that 35 number or if the Senior Bowl number was correct, because I thought he looked long-armed on tape, but didn't measure that way at the Senior Bowl.
Yep. And so do we have to get into does the arm end here? Does the arm end here? Right. Is that I remember that debate from last year.
Yeah.
Clint, when you look at the defensive line class, anything that you're waiting to see from the combine as far as the defensive line class goes?
Looking at some specific players, I think Jack already mentioned a few of them. I think some guys I expect to go blow it up. I think R. Mason Thomas out of Oklahoma is about to go look like a freak, particularly running the hoop. We see him doing some wave drill and 3-cone. That's a guy that, it's funny. He's kind of gotten this rep as a DPR, but when you look at some of his run defense numbers, he's somebody to dive back into the tape probably after the combine because I think he's going to go blow it up. Love the Malachi Lawrence mention on the arm length. And I'm glad y'all mentioned last year. In all the years I've done this, I've never seen that kind of turmoil that there was between Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, Combine, Pro Days about who was matching the correct measurements. Really hope to see more consistency there this year.
It was Will Campbell's agent. It was Will Campbell's agent.
Yeah. But and on the flip side, Armand Mimbu's agent's like, my God, guys, get your shit together. But Lawrence, I hear you. I mean, I saw that length where I believed when I saw 35-inch arms, I didn't think that was weird. He's definitely someone that's got to be circled as far as that. The Keldrick Falk mentioned, he's going to be the most, how do I put this? I use the example of when you've got a completely to this side and a completely to this side in the media and draft Twitter, et cetera. whether that be like a Will Levis kind of prospect in the past few years where you got people that love the guy and then you got people that think the guy's dog water. Like JJ McCarthy in the last few years would have been another example of that. Bo Nix, and I know I'm saying quarterbacks, but I say that to segue to Keldrick Falk's kind of become one of those guys where it's like you got people that say this is a top 10, top 15 player, and you got guys that think he's like an early 2. Really, really interested to see just what he participates in. And hey, if he doesn't, is he getting response from the league that he's higher than we imagine? That was a really good mention. I think another guy that could go out there and try and get some money this week, having done so again at the Senior Bowl, is TJ Parker out of Clemson. An opportunity for him to go participate in everything. Sorry, the dog's barking right now, and I can hear them hollering about it.
That's all right. I have a question on Keldrick Falk. So, and this might be bordering on hot take-ish, but did we want Keldrick Falk to be a different player than who he was? And the criticisms of Keldrick Falk are because we wanted him to be something bigger and better than he was. But to me, as I'm listening to everybody talk about him through the summer, through the season, and then hearing that there's some Keldrick Falk disbelievers, there's other people that will say that Keldrick Falk is one of the safest floors of any prospect on the defensive line class. Jack, buy or sell my opinion there?
I know exactly what you mean, because I think it's almost impossible to not have a little bit of kind of consensus clouding how you go into watching a player, especially like summer scouting. I suppose summer scouting is true, but it definitely gets the case further on as you go. But with a guy like Falk, like over the summer, it was, you've seen him in mocks top 5. So even if before you've even turned on the tape and watched him, you're thinking, okay, like this should be fun. And I do think sometimes naturally that can leave a bit of a bitter taste when you're watching it, is if you don't quite see that. The flip side is those guys that you watch where there's not the hype, and then you see a player that, like I was saying with Jalen Farmer, where I was watching him last night, and I was, heard him kind of mid-round guy, and I'm like, oh, I think this is way better than I thought. I'm enjoying this way more than I thought. I think Falk is a victim of that, but I do think he was miscast by a lot of people early in the season. I think there's maybe more of a growing acceptance of what he is now, because a lot of the conversation I hear about him is more around the, as you said, high floor. Now people talking more about him as, okay, he might not be a great pass rusher, but he's going to be a edge setter, set and forget run defender for a long time in the league. I think that's fine. Then it comes down to value. But I think for quite a lot of the draft process, it almost felt like people wanted him to be something he wasn't. But then equally, I do think he will probably go fairly high, because, you look like Michael Williams last year, different player, but like similar archetype. I preferred Williams, but similar archetype in that they are, there you go. There you go. That's great minds think alike. Long-armed, big run defending edge who flashes as a pass rusher but doesn't have the consistency. Well, Williams went really high, so if he can, and Falk he's either 20 on draft day or he's going to just turn 21. I can see a team talking themselves into that, because as much as like shooting for the moon is a big part of the first round, there will be GMs who go, you know what, like I just want a guy that fills that role that I need him to fill, and I'm confident he will. And he might never be a 10 out of 10, but if the range is, a 7 to an 8 or a 6 to a 7 or whatever, however you see him, rather than a 3 to a 10, there'll be teams who are just much more comfortable with that certainty.
Right. And ultimately, like I said, I think then that what I was perceiving, like Jack, I think you almost agreed with me.
Yeah.
Right. Like Clint Keldrick Falk is the player that we wanted him to be, different than who he is. And is the combine going to affect that perception at all?
I think if you looked at kind of an average consumer, average media member, everybody wants an edge rusher to be a guy that really runs the arc with a lot of speed and gets outside of the tackle and is this killer in that way. Versus, you need to give a little more appreciation to. Like, I think some of Falk's best snaps were playing more of an interior role. I mean, he's been listed at 285. I think the verified measurements were closer to about 275 on the guy. I mean, he looks every bit of 6'6". It's like, hell, 6'6", 280. It's like he's not supposed to be some arc rusher just gassing somebody outside the tackle, say like a Cassius Howell, for example, who's 30 pounds lighter than he is and has to rely on that not having as much length. With Falk, I am really excited to see how he does look. It's like a baseline. You use the word floor in some more of those speed components of rushing the passer. But I'll tell you, too, he is somebody that has had to pay the price for a little. When I say helmet scouting, that's not correct because it's not the same college team. But you have so many people like in that Trayvon Walker, Aiden Hutchinson debate of the 1-2 pick a few years ago, with Walker being more of the younger guy, extremely high athletic ability. I mean, tested at like 100 percentile versus Hutchinson, more of that arc speed rusher. You have a little bit of that now where people look at the body habitus of a Falk and almost get a little hesitant to that as more of his interior ability and some more of the meat and potatoes of that defensive line play versus just flash sacks, and you could keep pulling some other names. Shamar Stewart of last year, not a big sack guy, not as much with that, but plays with the big body and big athletic ability. I think that Falk, we might have put a little too high expectations, but I think when you really dive into it, it's going to all settle itself out. Like I know last night I put out I put out a little first round mock just for like pre-combine. And I think I had him around like 25, 27. And I don't even think he gets there. But I did like the fact that I did that almost as kind of like a floor of like, this is a little more realistic. It's like, if you looked at preseason, we were sold as if he was going to be like some top 5, top 10 pick. I don't think the league thinks of it that way either. I think some of that will settle out. But I think the biggest selling point of having said all that is, like we said, this guy will be able to buy his first beer on like week 1. For him to have that much of a floor of body habitus to work with and the versatility for a defensive line coach, it's like somebody's going to bet on the guy. I'm pulling for him, even though he's an Auburn man and I hate him.
Georgia fan, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I'm from Southwest Georgia, so you're either Auburn or Georgia down there for the most part. But I'm pulling for the guy because I do think he's had a lot of negativity thrown toward his profile right now that he hadn't really asked for or deserved. But the league will settle that all out.
Well, and I think this is I'm going to say it's the penalty of summer scouting, because in the summer the question was Ruben Bain, T.J. Parker, Keldrick Falk. Who's higher? Like, there wasn't even an Arvell Reese discussion. There was one draft professor that mentioned Arvell Reese before August, and that was EJ. Right? Nobody else was talking, and now Reese is, top 5 player in the class, right? So I think and what I'm seeing is with summer scouting is people are projecting prospects, whatever, but we need to be better. What I'm going to say is, let's identify who the players we want to watch are, but we don't need to rank them. Because I think the biggest issue with Keldrick Falk right now is he's not living up to the summer scouting ranking he was given. And that's why the media is down on him, is that he's making the media look bad because they wanted to prop him up. But that's just me. Randy had a really good question in the chat a few minutes ago. I think it was this one. No, it was this one. There we go. So I'm assuming that was a talk to text and not a Freudian slip there on the word Laura. I think that's supposed to be lower. But who's a day 3 player that you think is going to do really well on either side of the line? Jack, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I think probably is. I mentioned him, Grayson Holton from Oklahoma. I think he's just kind of one of the guys who will rise at the combine. He's not the biggest, he's not the strongest, but I think the explosiveness is going to turn heads at his size. I think another one who I'm definitely higher on than consensus, but like as a consensus day 3 guy, Quintavious Hutchins from Boston College. He is we're talking earlier about how people like kind of speed off the edge. That's his game. He's really explosive. I think he's bendy. I think he's a guy I would assume, given where he's kind of projected, that he'll do the drills and he'll do all of them. I'm interested to see what he weighs in at though, because I think he was listed at 240. It's like, 240 is fine for a situational pass rusher, but I'd like him to bulk up a little bit. I think the question will be, if he does bulk up, can he still look as explosive? But I think he could test well, so he's probably the one I'd be watching. Also, like an interesting one who I'm not as high on, but I think just an interesting late round name to watch, Trey Moore from Texas, because he's like that weird mix between, is he a linebacker, is he an edge, what's he going to be? I think he's really loose as an athlete. I think he drops into coverage well. So he's one I'll be interested to see in the drills.
Clint, any day 3 lineman?
Yeah, kind of just jumping from position to position. If you look at the tackles, I think Emil Wagner out of Notre Dame is going to go test really well. Kind of bordering on that 300, 302, 304 pound guy with a lot of length. He'll go run a great time, look great in drills with some agility, kind of lateral ability. I think he's somebody that consensus hasn't been quite as high on, maybe from a tape standpoint, but a little bit of that athletic upside. He's going to go hang in RAS. In that tackle group, I'd throw him in there. Not being repetitive of who we've already said. The Grayson Holton one kind of got stolen from me. He's going to go show out. He'll be one of the top performers, and he really got a lot of steam coming out of Senior Bowl just because with his body habitus. I mean, he's got the explosiveness that kind of pops. He's one. I'll give you another name on the defensive interior. I think Zane Duran out of Penn State. I had the opportunity to interview him in Mobile. And I know everyone, sells himself a little big, but I'll tell you, I mean, he told me, he said, I'm trying to crack 4.7, but I know in that 4.7 range as a defensive interior, I think he's somebody that'll go hang a number and needs to not be particularly, he's a bowling ball built guy, naturally built leverage. Thought he had a strong week there in Mobile. Like him as a day 3, I think could get himself some steam. As far as that edge group, Landon Robinson, that mention, he didn't get invited to the combine. Don't even get me started about how that is my number one snub of it. Landon Robinson, all joking aside, is the biggest freak in the draft as far as 700-pound bench, 700-pound squat, like 450-pound bench, can jump 33 inches. At 290, 295, 6'1", naturally built leverage.
Jack, are you familiar with the player? I saw your eyes light up.
I haven't watched him, but I know the Navy defensive tackle, isn't it?
Yep.
Freak.
Yeah, but those numbers are crazy.
Yeah, and just kind of wrapping it up, so as far as some edge rushers, I think that I already mentioned R. Mason Thomas. I think Kieran Crawford out of Auburn, somebody whose explosiveness could show out. In more of the kind of wave drills and looking at him laterally. And then Jayshon Barham out of Michigan is just being somebody that, started at Wisconsin as a Mike linebacker, made a transition to play more of that outside linebacker role the past few years at Michigan, and then ultimately as an edge rusher this year. 6'3", 241-ish. Really want to see what he measures in at. But, I mean, as far as explosiveness, It was like I saw somebody on Twitter the other day said my player comp for Jason Barham is Taz, the Tasmanian Devil cartoon.
Yes, I saw the same tweet.
Yeah, and that was pretty accurate, honestly. I mean, he's somebody that when we look at the wave drills and some of his shuttle, he's going to explode, and would like to see that as well. And then lastly, I throw one name, Nadam Tucker out of Western Michigan, older prospect in that 25-26 round. So preface that as a 2-year JUCO guy who transferred over. But I mean, he, all joking aside, had the top edge true pass rush win rate this year at over 40%, which is just astronomical. The Senior Bowl, you really saw in the drills his explosiveness, good bend. I think he's somebody that will show out in the drills. And for contenders who are more in their winning window, who are more comfortable on day 3 saying, yeah, he's 25, 26, cool, we get 5-6 years out of the guy, that's a W for us, versus say a team that's 2 or 3 years away. So he's got a smaller market. He's going to get pushed down some for age, but I think there's a big value in there for a certain 5-6 or so teams in the league. That's a few in response to that question.
Okay. Well, we are running at time. I want to give a shout out to my son Ramsey is watching the podcast. So I don't normally text people during a podcast, but I was texting Ramsey because he had some questions. But I will say, Ramsey, you can just put them into the comments section of YouTube and we can just show them on air like I was doing here for Brian, me, or Randy. So anyways, Jack, would you like to tell everybody watching about all of the other podcasts and content that you make?
Yeah, sure. So most of my work's over at the Touchdown, where I head up all the draft content. So we're putting out positional rankings at the moment, kind of mock draft stuff as well. I am deep in the throes of pulling together our draft guide for this year, which is up to 400 pages at the moment and counting. So that is going to be something giving me sleepless nights for the next few weeks, but hoping to get that out in maybe a month's time. I'm also going to be part of the Cheesehead TV draft guide again this year, covering kickers. So one to watch for Packers fans or anyone, to be honest, because it's a really good draft guide, not just for Packers stuff. And then I'm here every Sunday morning.
Clint.
Yeah, sorry, my computer was lagging there for a second. You can find one-stop shop, anything for me on my Twitter, my namesake, Clint Goss, or the handle NFL Draft Dome. Primarily NFL Draft, a little bit of a focus as well on my team, the Atlanta Falcons. But it's draft majority pertaining to all 32 teams in the league. I am a little bit of the sixth man off the bench here at NFL Draft Fanatic, and the fact that you'll see me on Sunday morning, you'll see me on Thursday night, you'll see me jump in, do something on Tuesday. We kind of jump that around. As I could apologize this morning. This is probably the least handsome I've looked on an episode. My shirt wear and being well groomed, as most know, as you could see by my pink toenails kicked up on the table here. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old daughter that had me up last night, and I dragged in here a little bit. So I would apologize too if my mother is watching this episode. Say, sorry, Mom, that I look a little half-assed this morning, as you would say. But yeah, yeah. And you'll see an uptick here in some of my appearances and stuff as we get closer, with the combine and the draft. But the best one-stop shop is really just at Twitter, incredibly active there. On a daily basis and always on here at least once a week.
So, Clint, you're a Hall of Fame sixth man off the bench. Like if Kevin McHale could make the Hall of Fame being a sixth man for the Celtics, you are the Kevin McHale of podcasts.
Yeah, baby. See, and like the sixth man, you don't always have your uniform in order every game night. So, today was my day, but I'll be ready.
So I want to thank everybody for watching. Brian and Randy, specifically in the chat, thank you for stopping by. Ramsey, thanks for turning on the podcast. So, Ramsey, to answer your question, no, Clint is not Adam Schefter. That was a text I got in the middle of the podcast. But Clint's favorite team is Atlanta, Ramsey, if you didn't catch that. And then Jack's favorite team is Green Bay. So my son just got Twitter so that he could keep up with all of the players changing teams.
Hell yeah.
Because I didn't want to have to fill him in on the 150 transactions. I'm like, just go to Adam Schefter. But for everybody else watching, Draft Professor is here every day. We're here at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern on weeknights. We're here Friday nights. We do a group mock at 7 p.m. where we have 32 people drafting for their teams. This week, it is Dale Altman and Newt Weston on the podcast. So Dale Altman, otherwise known as Bengals and Brews, and Newt Weston, who ironically is running the Cheesehead TV guide that Jack is doing the kickers for. We are a group of people at Draft Professor that cover the draft year round. So this draft happens in April, and then literally starting in May, you will see us breaking down the best players in college football starting at the first Monday of May. So we cover the draft and we cover college football like no other channel. For Jack Brentnall, Clint, Goss, myself, and the 80 podcasters at the Draft Professor, thank you for watching. We will see you on another podcast in about 20 minutes where we talk about the running backs. Have a good day, everybody.